Say if you say a lie or nonsense often enough, then it becomes established doctrine. That's the case for a lot of things. It's the reason why I don't touch religion. I'm only interested in metaphysics. All religion is secularized metaphysics. This idea of Hindu, by the way, it's not my opinion, it's a hardcore fact, doesn't refer, by the way, to any religion. There's no such thing as a Hindu religion. It refers to a people, not a religion. I've said this before in many videos, and many Indians have replied. It's like, wow, you're one of the few Americans that understands that. I mean, this crazy idea. Hindu. European and American Buddhists, by the way, propagate this idea of Buddhism versus Hinduism. And it's completely ridiculous. Completely ridiculous. By the way, the term Buddhism didn't even exist until the 16th century. The only time Gautama called his teachings a name, we called it Samyutta Nikaya 5.4, we called it Brahmayana, meaning path to the absolute. Anyway, this idea of reincarnation, it's also the main source of it is the Theosophical Society, by the way. I'll get into that in just a second, just skim over it lightly. But also, too, we have this idea from Latter-day Mahayanism, and also, too, from Vajrayana, or what Americans and Westerners call Tibetan Buddhism. This idea of reincarnation, which is not to be confused with Palingenesis, or Punabhavati, which means again becoming, i.e. transmigration. Transmigration is a huge distinction between that and the ideation that people have of persona non grata, like Bob, Sue, or Larry, after death was reincarnated. Personal transmigration, right? By the way, you could have one light reflected in a million soap bubbles. I don't know if, like the last time I took a bubble bath, might have been 20 years ago. You can see one light reflected in like a million soap bubbles, and of course it's one and the same light. A near perfect analogy, the same is true of transmigration. This idea of reincarnation or personal reincarnation in ancient Pali is called Sasaravara, which means perpetual becoming, or karmayana, that you are an agent or karman within samsara. Samsara just means to go round and round, i.e. samsarati. And so called what goes around comes around. This idea of personal reincarnation is not found within the Upanishads, the Rig Veda, Athura Veda, Samaveda, not found in the Digha Nikaya, Majjhima Nikaya, Anguttara Nikaya, Kudaka Nikaya, Samyutta Nikaya. It's not taught by Sri Sankaracharya in his Upadisa Sahasri or in the Vivachudamuni, not taught in the principal Upanishads. This is completely illegitimate. There's one great article about this, by the way, if you want to download it. It's out there for download, thanks to me. It's written by Dr. Anandakitish Kumaraswamy. I was friends with his son, Ramapi Kumaraswamy, who is a cardiac surgeon here in the United States. He gave me the rights to all of his father's works. The article's name is The One and Only Transmigrant. A passage from Sri Sankaracharya, or Sankaracharya, same person, is that there is no transmigrant, i.e. sansaran, other than the one. And I don't care if someone says God, I don't care if someone says Brahma, I don't care if someone says the Absolute, it makes no distinction to me. These are all different words for one and the same thing. The old saying in English that when one gives up the ghost, i.e. the time of death, and this is said that the spirit returns to the one that gave it forth. In other words, this idea of personal transmigration is actually not taught, and I'll give there's many examples of this, by the way, in the Bible. It was Jesus who said if one were to follow him, meaning Jesus or Christ, that we must hate our own soul, and also too said in the Bible that no man has ascended to heaven save him who has come forth from heaven. Or the old passage from the Bible, I live, yet not I, but the Christ in me. Or you could say, instead of Christ, you could say the One, or the Agathon, or the Absolute. 1,000 different names for one and the same thing, of course. Whether you agree with that or not is not my bone of contention. I'm not interested in arguing religion whatsoever, rather only metaphysics and that which is logical, sensible, and wise, of course. This idea of personal reincarnation, i.e. persona non grata, is a profane one. And in the West, this is an idea greatly promulgated by the Theosophical Society in error. The old Sanskrit passage tattvamasi, or that thou art, that with a capital T, i.e. the absolute or the one, or aham brahmasmi, you are the one or the absolute. Once again, this Brahmayana. Yana means path to. Brahman is not a god, it's a reference to the agathon, or to the absolute. So this one and only transmigrant. One of the two fundamental errors that Americans and Westerners have is this idea of reincarnation as being taught in the Vedas or the Upanishads or Buddhism, and this is completely incorrect. Totally incorrect without doctrinal substantiation whatsoever. This personal reincarnation is not taught. Punabhavati or bhava nubhava, which means becoming and rebecoming, is a reference to the one and only transmigrant. As in the case of the light, this idea of Bob, Sue, Larry, so on and so forth is not the case. To get into actually past life recollection, let's say, well, people will say thence, well, if there's no genuine reincarnation taught, then how would be the doctrinal references to past life recollection? That's a little bit more complicated, but it's actually quite simplex if one understands this idea of reflexive experience in reference to something that is not a transmigrant, as in personal, the persona non grata, Bob, Sue, Larry, and all of his memories, but a reflection or a remnant thereof, of that which, of course, transmigrates, but that is not personal reincarnation. Like, they laid down the ghost over here, and then Bob, Sue, or Larry was reincarnated over here. That, of course, is an error. Not only that, I mean, it's not my opinion, that's doctrinally the case. And this has been promulgated by the Theosophical Society. It's been promulgated by Vajrayana, or what we call Tibetan Buddhism. The same is true of my decades of experience debating the so-called Buddhists. This idea of Hinduism and the Atman versus Buddhism, and the no-soulism, this demonstrable nihilism, which is actually not taught. This idea of Hinduism versus Buddhism is a lie, a farce, has no doctrinal substantiation, and yet it exists, palpably so. And I've been debating that stuff for decades, and these people have nothing, no leg upon which to stand when debating that topic. And debate is not for the sake of debate, it's for actually establishing something that's logical and true. And we must have, of course, a point of reference. And even if it doesn't have to be necessarily doctrinal, however we're going to debate the teachings of something, we actually have to debate sola scriptura, i.e. the principle upon which we would make references to they did or did not teach that. And Westerners, of course, suffer greatly from this, and especially about this idea of no-soul nonsense, this nihilism, which, of course, is completely illogical and untenable. You can't have liberation without a liberant. You can't talk about a mata, or immortality, and thence deny anything that attains immortality. This atomistic, materialistic, nihilistic idea that there is only nibbana but nothing that attains it, and the psychophysicality is, of course, completely illogical. But anyway, this idea of reincarnation is not taught in the Vedas or principal Upanishads, nor any of the 5 Nikayas, not taught by Sri Sankaracharya. And there is a distinction with a huge difference between reincarnation and transmigration. And all Westerners and Europeans greatly suffer this idea of personal, reincarnation. The persona non grata, which gave up the ghost and picked up something else over here, i.e. a new body. And that is Bob, Sue, or Larry in a new wrapper. And that is, it's absurd, it's illogical, it's non-doctrinal. It's not taught by Advaita Vedanta, original Buddhism, and I do stress original. The Rig Veda, Samaveda, it's not taught at all. This idea of reincarnation, personal, persona non grata reincarnation. So there is the idea of superficial reincarnation, which would be seminal. In other words, someone were to have children and they would continue on their genetic line, kind of like a line of kings, or, keep up the family name. That sort of superficial, giving up, cloning oneself, where one is passed on to the next life. That is, of course, a mix with the husband and the wife, of course. That, of course, is mentioned, that sort of personal, I'm carried on. After I go, I'll still be here because of my family name, and all my kids, which carry half my genetics, will be carried on that is something completely different, but that is, of course, admitted to. You don't need to know about DNA genetics. I mean, for that to have been taught many thousands of years ago in the Vedas and the Nikayas and so on and so forth. I mean, that was obviously known. You know, like, oh, he looks just like his father. He looks just like his mother. That, of course, has also, too, been confused with transmigration, but that's something completely different. This is where one gives oneself up to another body in union with another body, you know, by generating new life, of which half of the genetics are, of course, yours. So, anyway, I keep encountering that confusion all the time where people use the word reincarnation, and that is not taught, nor is it logical. You know, psychophysical reincarnation, no different than talking about the consubstantiality of pure consciousness, which is never pure. I shouldn't have said pure consciousness. And regarding the manifestation between the signal and the radio, it goes no further than the radio. It's the consubstantiality of the radio and the signal, and a pure analogy between the consubstantiality between matter and spirit. It goes no further than the radio, in this case, of course, being the human body. So, anyway, you could download that article. You could ask me to find you the link for it. I know where the link's at. If not, I have it. It's called The One and Only Transmigrant by Dr. A.K. Kumaraswamy. But that's that notion of karmayana or karmavada, you know, that there's no escape, there's no getting off the roller coaster, there's only the perpetual becoming and re-becoming, and that there's no way off of it, the sasaravada of perpetual becoming. And the desire for that, of course, is one born out of primordial agnosis, and of course leads to suffering, boundless suffering, endlessly, until you have a desire and know that it needs to be cut off and terminated. So, anyway, there's the metaphysics of genuine refutal. I said refutal. Rebuttal against. I'll edit that out of this video. You could hear the fireworks going on outside. People are shooting 4th of July fireworks. Sorry about that. There's people down the street that apparently have unlimited funds and have bought an enormous amount of fireworks. And thanks so much for watching. I haven't made any videos over the past few days because I've noticed in the past that nobody watches videos really on the 4th of July weekend here in the United States. I know this is an American holiday, obviously so, but people kind of take it easy and they're not really watching videos. So have a lovely week, and thanks so much.